Good to know. Thank you. Very impressive work has been happening here, both in terms of research and finding new things and outreach. I'm quite impressed. So let me try to wrap up. I can just use the arrows to go down.
I think, yeah, perfect.
Okay. All right.
Maybe Michael let the technicians bring up.
Oh, okay. All right. I just wanted to note that there are no private individuals outside. I don't know if you know the story of town meetings in ancient Athens. Many ancient Athenians were kind of slacking in the streets, so the Athenians had policemen from who were Galates, who were northerners, going around and sweeping the streets, holding a rope painted red. So whoever, as they were sweeping the streets, was touched by the rope, he had the red mark, and he was called a private individual because that individual preferred its privacy than coming to the town meeting. So private individual in Greek is idiot, and it has taken a bad rap because of that origin. Okay, I don't see any private individuals out there, unless there are some in the streets that are being swept by Anthony's Galates. Okay, so let me try to introduce some of the. Okay, there you go. Screen sharing. So the work that I'm going to talk about, let me just try to give a quick introduction, is the result of a sizable grant that we've obtained from ARPA-E, which is the research branch of the Department of Energy in the United States. And we have studied uncertainty and the way it affects costs and planning and short-term planning, in particular in power markets. So and at the same time we have let me keep going. At the same time, we have tried to implement our work to one of the richest in terms of renewable resources, wind resources, and so on in the United States. The Southwest Power Pool, which is north of Texas, going all the way up to Canada. I think you have to open that's right. And then go to share screen and then select the open. You want to do it from here? If you go to share screen, I think you should be able to. Okay, there you go. Will you be advancing or do you want me to? You will be advancing the slide? Oh, I can do it using the arrows? Yep. Okay, thank you. So the Southwest Power Pool, which you can see here in red, that extends from north of Texas. Texas is not interconnected with the rest of the United States. It's a Lone Star state. They don't want the federal government to deal with them, sort of like the Brexit case in the United States. So Southwest Power Pool is extending north of Texas and includes a very big area. It's close to the Great Plains, so it has plenty of wind resources out of a peak demand of close to 30 gigawatts. Its wind peak on this particular day, for example, was 21. The energy content was 80% or more, and with additional renewables, meaning solar and so on, it was a bit higher. So you can see that there's a lot of uncertainty. At the bottom, I'm showing there multiple days of forecasts. The red is the actual or the average output of wind capacity, total wind capacity, and the gray are various forecasts that are 55 forecasts that we have available to indicate variability and correlation between individual wind farms. So there are 200 plus wind farms here. What I'm showing here is the total output, and you can see that in total, the various days, you can clearly see the cycles of individual days. This is within a month of May 2021. You can see that the various days are quite different. So the wind can be quite high and fluctuating during the day, low, super high, etc. And also you can see that by judging from the width of the gray band, which shows the 55 forecasts, you can see that the variance can be rather big or small. So we have different weather types, settled weather types, unsettled, high variability, low variability, and so on. On the right, you can see a specific day that indicates how things perform. However, it is very important, of course, to know the behavior of essentially each wind farm or groups of wind farms that are highly correlated between themselves and less highly correlated with others because of congestion issues and because of the ability to because of the desire to find the appropriate reserves that may be needed. So whereas current power systems use deterministic models based on as good as possible but deterministically treated forecasts of wind output, future markets and future short-term planning, day ahead, week ahead, operational planning, going all the way to real-time balancing markets at the 5-minute level, can gain a lot by being uncertainty aware and using this uncertainty. So, so in order to do that, it is important to be able to identify and characterize the risk associated with individual assets. What are individual assets? Wind farms or groups of wind farms that are very closely located. And also be aware and capture the system impact of these things. So wind farms, a particular wind farm, for example, has fluctuates, its output fluctuates throughout the day with some variability that may be larger in some hours and smaller in certain other hours. However, at the same time, if you want to plan for reserves in a robust manner, you have to take into consideration their correlations. Right, so two wind farms that are correlated, for example, they'll have a worst case that is lower for both of them. Whereas if the correlation is small or negative, the situation will be quite different. And at the same time, these correlated worst cases, if one intends to do robust optimization rather than stochastic optimization, which is also possible, needs to be able to identify these worst cases and do and perform a unit commitment that is optimal cost-wise and at the same time captures these issues. So if one were to see the current version of markets, typically the day-ahead operational planning or market clearing procedure is depicted here in black. We need to identify an energy balance, capture network congestion contingencies, and in those big balancing areas that have transmission constraints built in older times. There's a lot of congestion that has to be taken into consideration. We have to capture the N-1 reliability constraints that we are all accustomed to that address conventional generation, but also have an endogenous system reliability capacity reserve capability. So the uncertainty responsive proposal that we are implementing is able to do a fair amount of that. So here is a summary of individual asset and system risk, and I will speed ahead so that we can have a chance to discuss. So for renewable generation, there are individual asset available capacity that varies wind farm by wind farm. However, the correlations amongst them in the same hour or across hours is the system impact of this uncertainty. Conventional generation, okay, N-1 contingencies. On the demand side, we have to be able to deal with price inelastic demand, price elastic uniform bid, price quantity bids, and also complex bids. So for example, if you are looking at electric vehicle charging, there's a requirement to charge a certain amount over a period of time rather than at a specific hour and so on. For HVAC, you have pre-cooling, preheating, storage-like capabilities. Although there has to be an adaptivity of the day-ahead market security constrained economic dispatch system, meaning that demand has to adapt to the requirements, the weather correlated in system interactions of wind has to be taken into consideration. Storage, adaptive to day-ahead market security constrained economic dispatch, has to be part of the picture, and congestion contingency system interactions have to be taken into consideration. So, for example, when you look at the worst case to do some robust optimization of unit commitment, not only do you have to deal with the worst case output, but you also have to make sure that the reserves that you're able to procure by appropriate unit commitment are deliverable. So if I secure a lot of reserves that I cannot use because of transmission constraints, I haven't done very much. So all of these have to be important. Anyway, so let me rush through by showing the forecasts for individual and groups of wind farms and so on, say a few things about the robust solution that we are dealing with. So the robust solution is more or less similar to day-ahead market clearing prices today, except that there's an additional constraint that internalizes additional reserves that are sufficient to deal with the worst case of renewable resources and uncertainty in demand and so on and so forth. So let me give some examples and finish up. So here is how we deal with the system uncertainty of let's say wind farms. So here's an example of what we call an uncertainty set that we construct from the various forecasts. So we have about 55 forecasts. One could have 100 or more, but 55 is sufficient. And interestingly enough, most of these forecasts are provided by two European agencies, Energy and Meteo and Meteorologica, Spanish and a German company, and those allow you to construct some sort of a concentration set. We're not necessarily making any normality assumption, but a concentration set. And then that concentration set will give you the worst case if you minimize for example, the sum of wind farm output subject to being within this uncertainty set. So the shape of the uncertainty set as well as the size of that affect the worst case. So in this case, although the average or the forecast is 87 is 100 megawatts. Only 87, only 65, and only 43 can be obtained from these groups of wind farms that I have used here in order to make the issue more depictable in terms of a figure here. And if so on the top you can see two cases, one with different correlations. The one on the right has, as you can see, the off diagonal of the covariance matrix is, this is for a specific R, is quite different, and hence this minimization sort of moves at a different location, right? So whereas if the correlations are what we're showing, the covariance matrix is what we're showing on the left. The worst case is 87, 65, 43. And on the right, it's 74, 45, and 70, same averages and so on. So then I'm going to skip this, but the discussion is that you have to marry this or combine this to system uncertainty having to do with transmission contingency constraints. So if in this baby example of 3 buses, if if one of the lines is congested, one has to one has to absorb less wind and depict this in the optimization with a different what we call uncertainty factor. So reserve planning issues and reliability committed addressed with uncertainty sets. Reserves are needed for each hour, must be deployable, which means that they must be robust against transmission line congestion contingencies. Uncertainty of demand after it has been adapted to the optimal security constrained economic dispatch. Over and above the adaptability, they can be included in robust reserve planning. So rather than minimizing the sum of wind output subject to being in this uncertainty set, one minimizes the sum of wind output minus demand, right? Because demand is contributing to reserves. Ramping needs may also be obtained by maximizing for example, the sum of wind output in a particular hour minus the sum of wind output in a previous hour. And this has to capture the intertemporal correlations. And so on. So and it's also very important to do whatever one can with the uncertainty set, its shape and its size, and that's sort of a big issue where we combine classification schemes for weather types, and then for each weather type we can find better likelihoods of each of the 55 forecasts, rather than assuming an equal likelihood. And that's more or less what I wanted to talk about. We are ready to consider a pilot plan within Southwest Power Pool and look at some of the important issues. So, thank you.
If you have questions so that the people on Zoom can follow, I will be passing a microphone around.
All right. Can you hear me? Yes. Thanks for the nice talk. So I had a question about, so you include all this uncertainty in your model about the lines and individual assets. Is there any analysis regarding the decentralized interpretation of this problem? Like, what does it mean in terms of the price signal? What is included in this price? Yeah, that's mainly.
To the extent that there's some, to the extent that one models adaptability of demand, which we haven't quite done yet, a distributed approach would be the only way to do that. So then you have to do operational planning and repeat a few times with a kind of a blackboard and every flexible participant resolving their own problem. Other than that, there's no much of a distributed effort that we have put into the issue. However, in the United States at least, the participation of virtual and financial trading interests in the day-ahead market, which is a hedging market, essentially. It's not a real market, is very important. So each one of those traders, today, they solve the deterministic day-ahead market problem in order to take positions. If they were to participate in a future market that's uncertainty aware, they would have to make the decisions by solving themselves this problem. Also, wind farms can bid appropriately because there's when real time comes, there's an adjustment for differences. So if they know what the impact is of them charging above or offering above or below the worst case, they could be helped by doing these calculations themselves.
Okay, so now it's my turn. Thank you very much. This was very insightful. I have two questions on the worst case. I will start with the first one and then we see. Now, you define the worst case in terms of minimum output of renewables, if I understood correctly, in the spirit that you have. In Europe, many times we have the problem of, let's say, dealing with the maximum because we have too much, let's say, increase, for example, which creates, let's say, voltage problems or basically it creates the problem of not being able to commit enough generating units to provide stability, inertia, and so on. So I wonder if you thought about also including the maximum, let's say, so having two worst cases.
The maximum would be important if one is looking at ramping situations, and there you have to look at the intertemporal dynamics. But the maximum on a particular hour would be handled in the congestion constraints, right? So if wind output is forecasted to be very high, which is the case at night, those hours that I showed where 80% of etc. were taking place at night.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the situation where the maximum is pushing, let's say, dispatchable generation below its technical minimum. So I'm thinking of that type of problem.
Oh, but of course that's the basic nonlinearity with unit commitment. So the cost of unit commitment is not just the startup, the shutdown cost and the delays and so on and so forth, but also the minimum generation constraint. So if the minimum generation constraint is such that you need to either increase your demand or decrease other generation that has reached its limits. So that's an issue, and that's going to affect the unit commitment decision. So this is what we mean by reserves being deployable in each one of those of the 24 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the great presentation. Just wanted to ask you, with respect to the formulation that you discussed in one of the previous slides. So you had this traditional reserve constraints, and then you had this one in the blue box, which is the additional constraints. So if we try to interpret this from a market perspective, the dual multipliers of these first constraints are the reserve capacity prices, as they're called at Europe at least. What is the interpretation of this extra constraint, of the dual multiplier of this extra constraint? Because maybe I missed it. Is it the utilization price of these reserves, or is it a probabilistic dual multiplier? Maybe I missed that. Sorry if I missed it.
Indeed, there is a dual variable which can be interpreted as the benefits or the price that a reserve provider should receive, and also the decrease in the income that that generators, such as in particular wind generators, the decrease in the income that they should get because the worst case is much smaller than the average energy forecast that they provided. Now, the extent to which these prices can be used in a market context is an issue of great contention. And you know, the predominant sort of opinion till this point is that the reserves should be socialized. The cost of reserves should be socialized. However, that's food for thought. That perhaps wind or very variable and unreliable resources should receive a decreased payment for their participation in the energy market because of the non-reliability. So that's an issue that's very very important. And reserves are priced in some cases. In many other cases, they are not priced. So one can consider this model that includes these additional constraints as something that is part of the reliability unit commitment that the system operator solves. System operators are very conservative. They don't want to hear anything about failures. And usually they commit more than is needed. So if there is some sort of cost optimization that's documented and accepted, they will commit a reasonable amount. And this is our objective right now. And Southwest Power Pool does not intend to use in the pilot study, if we proceed with one, does not intend to use these dual multipliers as part of pricing.
I think that relates to what Nicola was asking, essentially, of to what extent your model can be used for market clearing, if I can rephrase your question. And right. If I understand your answer correctly, you're saying it can be used in reliability unit commitment, but not for market clearing necessarily because it's contentious. That's
the going sort of acceptance at this point. And many system operators in the United States have a two-stage thing. So there's a market clearing, then the system operator modifies the unit commitment relative to the one that the day-ahead market resulted in, and prices then are calculated. For example, in New York, in the New York Power Pool, prices are locational margin prices are determined after the unit commitment has been modified.
Maybe state your name and affiliation before posing the question, so we get.
Achilles Stratigakos, Imperial College London. Thank you very much for the great presentation. I want to ask, in some cases we see that operators have like stringent time constraints to solve the problem, and now we are moving from a deterministic to a robust solution. So I assume there is an increase in the complexity or the time to solve. What is your view on this? Would this robust solution create computational issues? Thank you.
The cases that we have solved, and we have solved the full repeatedly the full problem for Southwest Power Pool, which is a sizable problem. The experience is that there are no time constraints for actually reaching a solution, and we have no reason to believe that this will be the case. If one is looking at more interesting sort of extended locational marginal price issues and so on, and there will be a discussion about that tomorrow in the last session, then the time is a constraint to actually solve the convex hull pricing problem. Might be quite a task. Although we already have Panagiotis Andrianesis, who will be addressing this issue tomorrow, sorry, who will be addressing this tomorrow, has some experience that is quite positive.
All right, I think we are, oh, sorry.
Hello, I'm Manolis Bakirgis. I'm with the Hellenic Power Exchange in Greece. So I have a question. I understand that the current gap between the current practices, we have a deterministic unit commitment and you propose to move to a robust unit commitment. How transparent can this methodology be for market participants? Because transparency is often an issue. It's different to have a publicly available, curve, wind forecast curve. I'm not fully aware of what is publicly available compared to what? Thank you.
Great question. So right now, most of the experience is with the system operator, either using some sort of a model, but in 99% of the cases using the judgment of a group of wise and very conservative members of the system operator. They determine reserve requirements. So if the reserve requirements are determined to the satisfaction of the system operator as a result of forecasts that are determined in a very scientific manner. So we have very advanced meteorological models that estimate every 5 minutes on a small grid, 5 by 5 kilometers, weather, multiple aspects of it, and then translate this to the output of individual wind farms. So my guess is that if those forecasts are made available in general, that will ascertain a transparent procedure for determining unit commitment.
Maybe one more question on my side related to what was discussed earlier about prices. So understood that it's maybe an issue to use this for market clearing, but if it were, I think I understand your point about this kind of charges on the renewable suppliers. If I get the decentralized argument correctly, there are wind production decisions that are implicated in the coupling constraint that relates to the robust requirement. So I think that is the reason why you discount the payment of wind suppliers. It's because those variables are implicated in that coupling constraint. But then I'm wondering if you've checked whether the reserve prices themselves are affected for the reserve capacity if you solve this model with your approach versus a more traditional approach, or just removing that constraint?
That constraint actually takes away, the Lagrange multiplier of that constraint takes away, decreases the Lagrange multiplier of the energy balance, which is determined by the bids that wind farms make that establish the maximum available capacity that then is used in the security constraint economic dispatch. So in this additional constraint, if the capacity was firm of wind farms, then they would appear, then that additional constraint essentially would be a duplication of constraints that are already there. But because of the worst case, then the bid of wind farms has been multiplied by a certainty coefficient, which is the ratio of the worst case modified by transmission constraints, by congestion, divided by what was used in the economic dispatch without this constraint. So yes, then the payment for let's say wind farms would be affected by the Lagrange multiplier in the energy balance constraint, a little bit by let's leave this out, but it will also be affected by transmission constraints and by that new multiplier in this additional system reliability constraint. So indeed, then it's the sum of these two prices of these two Lagrange multipliers that affect the payment of capacity that is committed to provide energy. Indeed. So if you solve it with and without this, the Lagrange multiplier of the energy balance constraint is different.
And I imagine that the tendency is to increase the reserve price. It's always a non-negative contribution.
Yes, because one needs more reserves, and of course the unit commitment is taking place outside, right? So you do the unit commitment for a specific unit commitment. You calculate those Lagrange multipliers.
All right, I think we are even ahead of schedule in the beginning of this conference. Thank you a lot, Mike. And no, maybe one more question from Jahum.
Thank you. Since you have time, I'd like to. Yeah, thank you for the talk. As I am listening to all this discussion, it makes me think about the gap between the day-ahead markets or unit, when you solve the unit commitment and the real time, and how I understand. Between those two markets are when they are, the based algorithms are similar, then maybe they can coincide better. But what you are proposing is kind of, making it bigger, the gap between the algorithm between what we solve in real time and the day ahead. And of course, there are virtual biddings that are very important in the US. But by increasing this gap, do you expect any, some more inconsistencies or more kind of market power from this hedge fundings or something like that by incorporating this? Yeah, maybe it's a tricky question, but I just want to ask your opinion.
Let me wear the hat of Bill Hogan, our collaborator, who would reply to this as follows. The participation of virtual bidders, financial bidders, in the day-ahead market, which is a financial or hedging market, is such that the clearing prices in the day-ahead market, this virtual day-ahead market, financial day-ahead market, approach, they do away with arbitrage, and the average of the real-time balancing market, the average clearing price of the real-time balancing market, tends to be very close, if not the same, with the day-ahead prices. So, will the market, in its infinite wisdom, achieve this? I don't know, but so far, using the current approach, in the United States, it's quite often the case, and it's mostly the case, that the average of the real-time balancing market, the 5-minute real-time balancing market, is very close to the day-ahead market. Of course, on certain days it's going to be higher, other days it's going to be lower, and so on. So the financial markets or the virtual markets will tend to guide participants to bid more wind or less wind, or more financial or more virtual capacity, energy contribution, and so on and so forth. But that remains to be seen, and that's an issue. And this is why what we're proposing to, in other words, proposing. We are contemplating or considering. So the option of solving the day-ahead market without financial bids and having this additional reserve requirement is an issue, because then you will need, how do you reconcile if you pay for reserves, how do you reconcile them in the real-time balancing market? So you have to use some these constructs that ERCOT in Texas is using, of what we call them, the reserve, the RDCs, yes. ORDCs. The reserve curves, yeah. Which essentially are constructed on the basis of some averaging arguments, looking in the past, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's a tough problem.
There is a cynical extension of that point made by Jehum, which I don't know if I fully subscribe to it, but I hear it, which says that anything we do about day-ahead market clearing, whether it's convex hulls, reserve requirements, how we model uncertainties, blah, 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 is a bit meaningless if the day-ahead price will just be the average real-time price. Since the real-time drives the day-ahead, the whole discussion about how we do pricing the day-ahead becomes a bit less relevant. It's something one could float as an idea, as an afterthought of what we're discussing here. I don't know where you stand on that, but since we have another few minutes,
I don't think it's irrelevant. Maybe it's a bit irrelevant, but not really irrelevant. I'd like to defer this. Would you like to say something, Panagiotis?
Yeah, so
state name and
yes, Panagiotis Andrianessis, Boston University and Minpari PSL. It is also a matter of how we define the prices in real time. So I think that the two should be consistent. That's what we can say, but certainly not irrelevant. So and it is also a matter of providing incentives to market participants to actually participate in a day-ahead market, because it's a voluntary market. And currently, like in the US, there is a lot of capacity that is not participating in the day-ahead market. So I think any design should be consistent between real-time pricing and day ahead, and that is an issue that we see when we include like risk in the day ahead market with what Michael has presented, and we apply a perception of risk that the ISO has, but not necessarily the market participants, and that may be also like a source of friction. Yeah, just thank you.
Yeah, that's very important issue of how can you avoid opting out of the market in the typical US laissez-faire type of an approach. Any participant, any asset can select to self-schedule, drop out of to not accept instructions by the system operator or the market maker, and self-schedule, which was happening quite a lot. It's happening a little bit less, but still in big in SPP, for example, that we've looked at, what is it still 20-30% who self-schedule, and in the more and 40-50%, it's going down, but it's still quite high. And so then when we solve the problem with actually changing the behavior of those self-scheduling folks to abide by market clearing economic dispatch, the overall cost, the overall social cost becomes lower. So how do you avoid that? If you make sure that they have no incentive to drop out of the market, you can increase the participation in the market. I don't know, in Europe, are you allowed to self-schedule?
For sure, you are allowed to self-schedule. I'm a bit unclear as to whether you're allowed to withhold reserves from day-ahead reserve markets. I think in Belgium it's voluntary, Jack. And I guess in Greece our PPC colleagues can tell us, yes, no. It's not allowed to withhold from the ISP. Okay. No, actually we have all participation both in day-ahead and ISP. So it's obligatory participation, makes sense for such a small system. Yeah. Name and affiliation.
So Jacques Cartouet from Silova. In Europe, there is also this self-scheduling discussion, but it's a bit different because it depends from one country to another. So in some countries, like for example in France, they are very the system operator is very protective of its dispatching responsibility, and so the nomination of the asset will have to be set in advance, and at one point they cannot modify the dispatch anymore. In Belgium, this is a bit more laissez-faire, with some responsibility being left on the asset owner to decide on its own imbalance, and maybe it can help the system in one way or another. And this is actually one area that we're currently working on with Anthony on the self-scheduling and making sure that the incentive is for an asset that can participate in the balancing process to be available, and to make sure that these incentives are there.
Okay, interesting. We'll see how things will change if Le Pen gets more of a say in the future. We are terrified with Trump getting more of a say, of course.
And with that optimistic note, I propose we take our first break. Thank you very much, Michael.